Today I'm going to be rambling about the Leica M2 and the Canon P. Alright, so I'm home alone and I'm about to sell one of these cameras, and I've always wanted to make a video comparing them because I think they're extremely comparable. I think one is better than the other, but one is obviously a much better value. And I think that one can nicely lead you into the other if you end up liking this style of shooting. So it's Canon P, Leica M2, both 50s rangefinders, meterless, both have 35-50 frame lines. The Leica has a 90, the P has a 100. Realistically, those are interchangeable. You could shoot a 100 on the Leica, you could shoot a 90 on the P. You just frame a little loose or tight depending on which lens is on which camera. But rangefinder framing in general is not 100% accurate, so it doesn't really matter. So I think the P is an amazing entry level into interchangeable lens rangefinders because it's an LTM mount, tons of lenses available, tons of good lenses available, a lot of vintage lenses for very cheap. You can get Soviet lenses extremely cheap. There's modern lenses, there's modern Leica LTM lenses, the limited edition lenses. They're not really realistic if you're trying to save money, but they're really cool. I know there's a Summicron, like one of the modern ones, V4 or 5, whatever, in LTM. It's obviously very limited release and very expensive, but Voigtlander specifically has an entire lineup from very wide, I think down to 15mm. There might be the 12 LTM, but I'm not sure. All the way up to, they have 90mm lenses. They probably have 135, but I'm not entirely sure about that. 135mm on a rangefinder, I know you gotta be crazy to do that, in my opinion. 190mm is already hard enough to focus and frame with, since the frame lines are so small, especially fast ones. Nailing focus is tough. Well, I got distracted, so here's a photo. Alright, so let's talk. They're very similar cameras. One does some things better, the other does certain things better. So we'll talk with the P, because if you add up everything and don't weight any specific attribute, the P probably would win a head-to-head just on things that are better. When you add up what actually matters, the Leica is still better, and that's why it costs so much more. But the P does have some advantages, so they're pretty little, but I still think they're worth talking about. Didn't make it that much further without getting distracted again, so here's another photo. The shutter speed dials. They both have 1/1000th of a second down to 1 second. A bulb mode and a flash sync mode. Leica's flash sync speed is 1/50. Canon P is 1/55. I guess that one wins, but in real world usage, it doesn't matter. They're the same for all intents and purposes. But they also both spin clockwise to increase your shutter speed, which is nice because you could get used to using this camera and very easily move over to this camera. But the one thing they do different is the Canon P shutter speed. You could have it on bulb and you could jump, so it goes bulb, flash sync, 1/1000th. So 2 clicks and you're ready to shoot. So one thing I like to do, I always store my cameras on bulb mode. I don't know, I probably read about it somewhere, said it was good for the camera, releases tension or something in the shutter mechanism. But I kind of just like it. It's a way, it's like turning off my camera. I put it on bulb mode, I put it away even though there's no batteries. But so when I take my camera out to work and pull it out in the middle of the day, walking from site to site in the morning, I can just go bulb right over to like 500th, 250th. I usually just keep my shutter speed 250th reduces motion blur, and I can keep depth of field as high as I can for what I'm metered for. I find when I drop down to 1/125th, I have to be a little more conscious of my my movements to get a nice sharp image. So 1/250th is usually my go-to shutter speed, unless it's ridiculously bright out. I'll probably bump it up to 1/500th, but I value the depth of field more than the speed once I'm at 250th. But with the Leica, I gotta go bulb, 1, 2, 3. You can't, it doesn't go from bulb to 1000. I mean, it's a little nitpick. I'm trying to just talk about the little differences I notice in real world use using both these cameras for a while now. I mean, it's not a huge deal. That's why I was saying, if you weight the things that actually matter, this camera wins. If you just assign them 1 point for everything that this camera does better, this camera probably would win. Well, actually it would win, because I'm looking at my list right now and I have more things written down for this camera. So the shutter speed also is much grippier on this camera, which the Leica's pretty bad at. When I'm like walking around, hot summer day in the city, get a little sweaty. This thing has like no grip at all. Again, I set my shutter speed, but sometimes I do want to bump it up or down really quick, and once you're used to using this camera, you can kind of just count in your head, all right, I'm at 250th, all right, if I drop down twice, you got to really grip this thing. This one is easier to grip. So another advantage to this. Then there's I don't know if this is actually in the manual or not, I should probably look, but to rewind this camera, you have the little rewind thing you drop down here, lever I guess you could call it. The Canon has a collar around the shutter release, and you have to rotate it like, I don't know, 100-ish degrees, and then it releases the take-up spool and you could rewind. So it has A for advance, R for rewind. If you just go, so, here we go, we'll fire a shot. I don't know if you can see too, but there's A, and then there's R. So when you're on A, you know you can shoot. Let me make sure. Alright, so fire. If I move this a few degrees off A, maybe 10 degrees, I don't know, it locks the shutter, you can't release it. So that's nice if you have a soft release, you throw it in your bag, it's pretty easy to accidentally fire off a shot, waste the frame. Nobody likes wasted frames. The Leica, that doesn't exist. If you have a soft release, there's no way to protect that from getting fired. In real world use for me, I don't use a soft release, and I've never had my shutter accidentally hit in my bag. So, take what you will. But we have another advantage, Canon P. Next, let's see. Rewind. This one is actually a genuine positive. For the P, it has a nice rewind lever, and it's integrated into the top plate pretty nicely. It looks really good. It looks better than the way Leica did it in M4 and the newer M4, M5. Well, M5's different. M4, M4P, M4.2, M6, M7. Yeah, so it's nice. Top plate looks. This camera's just beautiful, I have to say. But this is really nice. This is a genuine detraction. People talk about this a lot. This thing's annoying. It's slow. I don't mind the take-ups. I'll get to that later. I don't mind the take-up spool loading. The removable take-up spool in the M2 and M3. I actually kind of like it once I got used to it. But this is genuinely, whatever. It looks really nice. I like the way this looks. Again, better than the newer Leicas with the fast rewind. But the rewind crank, I guess. This is better than that front. A genuine plus for this. All right, I guess we'll go down to the frame count. So this has an automatic frame counter, automatic resetting frame counter. This has a manually set frame counter, which, if you load it properly, I guess, if you load it a specific way, you can load your camera however you want, I don't really care. If you load it a specific way, you get 38 frames every time, and you never have to adjust this ever again. You get to frame 38 You advance to make sure the roll is actually done. Take the roll out, finish that. Put the roll in, advance once. That's your first of a roll shot. You could take it or you could burn it. You could use it or you could just click past it. And then once you advance one more time, you're at the first frame again, and you never even had to touch that, and it's reset itself. So while it's not an automatic frame counter, for me, it became an automatic resetting frame counter. So a not genuine plus for this, but it's on my list. Metal shutter curtain. Can't burn holes in it. So that's a genuine plus. It is slightly louder, but these are still pretty quiet cameras overall. Let's see, like, I don't know if this is going to be the best comparison, but both cocked. Let's put them on 1/250th. All right, Leica, Canon. It's a little tinnier. I guess you could tell it's metal. A little bit louder. Not by much. It's still quieter than the SLR. What else? I feel... Oh, so the loading. It's a pretty hot topic with this camera. But this has more traditional loading. So if you're coming from any other Japanese SLR, most other cameras, honestly, most other 35mm cameras, load like this. You know, the back swings open. You load it, close it back up. It's good to go. The Leica, on the other hand, has a removable bottom plate, then the film door, and the removable take-up spool. But one thing I found out that I really like about this is once you put that leader, once you lock that leader into this take-up spool, it's not coming off. You know, you hear people not loading cameras like this properly. I mean, it doesn't happen that much if you are careful and you just do it properly. But you hear the horror stories, someone shot an entire roll, once-in-a-lifetime photos. They get to the last frame they're expecting, and the camera just keeps advancing. And you open it up, and you never caught on. You weren't taking any of those photos. The leader is not coming out of that take-up spool once it's in properly. There's a little notch that shows you that you got it in far enough. It's good to go. Which I actually like. It's slow, but it's not coming off. So I guess the mount. We could talk about the mount, because that's a genuine plus. That's a huge plus, in my opinion. That when you wait, along with one other thing, is why this camera costs a lot more than this camera. And people prefer it. And it's the mount, because while the LTM mount is great, you could use every single LTM lens on this camera with an adapter that barely adds any bulk, or it adds no bulk and doesn't remove any functionality from the lenses. It's almost not even there if you get a good one, it's not even there. It's an M-mount lens for all intents and purposes. And the other thing about the M-mount is its bayonet. It's a lot faster. This is honestly sometimes when you're fumbling with lenses in the field, again, hot, sweaty day, butterfingers, this is more annoying. At least for me, I always have to make sure I make sure I set all my lenses to the close focus distance when I mount. It makes it a lot easier. The little rangefinder, I don't actually know what you call it, but the little arm right there that syncs with the rangefinder, syncs the lens with the rangefinder, kind of gets in the way if you don't have it at close focus distance, and it makes it annoying to get the thread started. And then, you're kind of sitting there spinning. It's not that big of a thing, but this is real easy, a bayonet mount like every other, majority of other mounts out there. And then I guess the biggest thing that this camera just genuinely crushes this camera on, and why that this will never be a equal alternative to the M2, is the viewfinder. It's just so much cleaner, because it only shows M2 specifically. Some of the other M-mount cameras double up frame lines, but M2 is a 35 by itself, a 50 by itself, a 90 by itself in the rangefinder patch. So super clean, and the patch itself is super contrasty. It's sharp. It's really easy to use in low light. It's very, your eye just can see it. Where this camera, the rangefinder is good, the viewfinder is good, but the patch is more of a blob with loosely defined edges and very low contrast. The finder's clear, but it flares more. The 35mm frame lines, you really gotta press your eye up against the viewfinder, and even kind of sometimes have to roll your eye around the frame to make sure, if you're really critically framing something, to make sure you got what you want in or got what you don't want in out. So that's where really this camera just wins. The two main reasons are why this camera cost, I don't know, $1,400 at the time of filming right now, and you could get this with a really good, at least last time I checked, which wasn't that long ago, but things are crazy right now. You could get this with like a 51.8, which is the Canon, is an amazing, really good lens, for probably like $300. And they're great cameras, and they could lead you very nicely into this because M-mount glass is pretty expensive, and this camera is pretty expensive. So if you spent a lot of money on a body, sometimes you want to lessen the blow for a little bit. You could just adapt the lenses you've been using with this onto this. And this makes a great backup camera because once you are really used to shooting the rangefinder and the inevitable, you get one of these cameras to keep for a long time. So no matter how good it works and reliable it is, it's eventually gonna need to get serviced. Whether that's tomorrow or in 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. That's for you to decide. But this is a great camera just to have. It's not a lot of money just sitting in a cabinet, not getting used. It's a good camera to have as a backup to continue to use a rangefinder when this maybe isn't with you. I mean, I had another camera repaired recently, and the repair times are pretty wild right now. I sent my camera out in May and got it back like a month ago. Actually, no, not a month ago, 2 weeks ago. So it was gone for almost 5 full months, which was painful. So this is really good to have. And if you keep maybe one LTM lens around that you could still use on this, you always have something ready to go. Keep that rangefinder mindset going. But I'm actually selling this camera and keeping this camera. That's just because I ended up getting an M4 P. I shoot a lot of 28, and this camera actually works well with 28. The finder is almost, the entire finder is almost equivalent to a 28mm, so I just like having frame lines. It's kind of reassuring. So I used this camera for a while, and I mean, I upgraded. I don't know, I wouldn't call it necessarily an upgrade, but it's nice. It has the quick load. It's got the 28 frames. It's got a hot shoe, which is really nice. Neither of these cameras have hot shoes. They're both cold shoes. They both have PC syncs. The Leica, I guess that's another thing I didn't think of. Good thing this wasn't over yet. The Leica, I mean, the Canon P comes with a standard PC sync port, like any modern well, they're probably doing away with them now, but newer cameras, this was the standard for a long time to have a PC sync. This had a weird proprietary, this one was converted by the previous owner, but it had a weird proprietary thing that you had to get an adapter for, and then it stuck out in your face. So unless you get this converted, this wins there. I don't like fumbling with cables though, so. I guess also, I didn't talk about the backs. They both have decent little rewind. Decent little ISO reminder dial. That's about it. I guess you could talk about build. So I want to talk about build quality, I guess, and refinement as two different things, because I think their build quality, which I guess I would mean more as how robust they are. I feel like they're equal. This camera's made really well. It's just not as refined as this camera. When you pick it up in your hand and you hit the advance, it's a little crunchier. The shutter doesn't sound as nice. This is easily the nicest advance I've ever used. It's so smooth. It's just like, it's like a little fidget spinner just to play with. It's so enjoyable to use. I had an M3 also. This was 1,000 times better than the M3. I know everyone always talks about how smooth that camera is, and a lot of people have maybe not got to play around with one of these and maybe got to try one of those, and it's a really nice advance on that camera, but this is just, I don't know, very, like, I don't even know how to describe it. So they do live up to the refinement hype, and I think that they're both extremely robust cameras. The only thing with rangefinders is bumps and drops. Don't drop your camera, but it happens. They can knock the rangefinder out of alignment, which isn't something that would really happen with SLR, I guess. I don't know. There's other things that I guess you could break dropping it, but that's one thing. I don't think you'll really break one of these cameras, but like my brother actually has one of these cameras too. He dropped it pretty hard and put a nice dent in the corner by the viewfinder window and jacked up the rangefinder completely. But the camera functions flawlessly otherwise, so I guess it's a weak point of rangefinders in general. They usually have the very fragile components kind of close to the edge, so a tough drop on that corner can really do some damage. But yeah, this is stupid analogies. Rolex, Seiko, Mercedes or BMW, Toyota, Honda, great cars. I drive a Honda, but it's more luxurious, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word. Feels better in your hand, though this feels really good in the hand, honestly. It's got a little bit more grip on the right side. It's a little longer, but thinner. Like if you look from top down, the dimensions are a little bit different. Yeah, you can't see from there, whatever.
Through the magic of editing, you guys can see.
So, it's a great camera. I love it. Got me into rangefinders. Made some amazing photos with it. It's small. Benefit of rangefinders, they're small. The lenses are really small. Yeah, so if you're on the fence about, do I get a Leica? Do I get a Canon P? Never used a rangefinder before. I think this is an amazing option to get into. You could get a fixed lens rangefinder and then just go straight for this, but then, like I said before, it's kind of a double whammy when you have to buy M-mount glass and an M-mount body at the same time, when you could have had this camera. You could get like a 35 and a 50 and the body for pretty cheap. And then when you get this, you just get some adapters and you're good to go. Yeah. Sorry for my ridiculous rambling. I don't do this very often. I figured I'd just have some stuff to say about these cameras. There's some other great videos that go into like the technical stuff a little bit harder. Maybe a little bit of history. I just wanted to talk about like how I felt using both of them for a while in the real world.